Shall we start, ma'am?
Yes.
Warm good afternoon to our respected resource person, Professor Dr. G.B. Reddy, sir, principals, deans, and HODs of various law institutions, faculty members, and the dear participants of this faculty development program. I'm Kritika Dhanapal, Assistant Professor of Law, and I continue being the moderator for the afternoon session as well. On behalf of the Chennai Dr. Ambedkar Government Law College, Pudupakkam, our beloved principal, Professor Dr. Gauri Ramesh ma'am, and the organizing team, I welcome you all to the day 6 afternoon session of the FDP. We strongly believe that we have met with the expectations of the participants in organizing this FDP program, which is a first of its kind among the affiliated government law colleges in Tamil Nadu. I now invite our beloved principal and the convener of the FDP program, Professor Dr. Gauri Ramesh ma'am, to welcome a resource person for the session. Please, ma'am.
Thank you, Kritika, once again, and good afternoon and a warm welcome to one and all present here for the second session of the 6th day of the FDP program. On behalf of the Directorate of Legal Studies and Chennai Dr. Ambedkar Government Law College, Pudupakkam, it gives me immense pleasure in welcoming our resource person for today, respected Professor Dr. G.B. Reddy, Professor of Law, Osmania University, Hyderabad. Sir was very kind-hearted when we approached him for this FDP program, and he readily accepted. Sir is a pioneer in constitutional law and a much sought-after academician by various law universities and institutions across the nation. His lectures are always an academic treat for the legal fraternity throughout. His differential approach to Indian Constitution mesmerizes his audience and keep them thoroughly engrossed. With these few words, I take this opportunity to extend my heartfelt thanks to you, sir, for encouraging us in our academic activities and accepting our invite and bestowing us with your valuable lecture. Sir's topic for today is effective teaching of constitutional law. With these few words, I welcome you once again, sir. Over to you, Kritika.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your welcome address. Now I take the privilege in welcoming our speaker of the session, our respected Professor Dr. G.B. Reddy, sir, Professor of Law, Osmania University, Hyderabad. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker of the day, who is going to talk to us on the topic, effective teaching of constitutional law. Professor Dr. G.B. Reddy, sir, is a lawyer turned academician. He obtained his law degree, master's degree in constitutional law, and PhD from Osmania University. His area of specialization includes constitutional law, judicial activism, and IP. He specialized in the area of IP as an independent researcher, publisher, and a teacher. He has a brilliant academic record with 3 gold medals in LLB and 1 gold medal in LLM, apart from being the first candidate to have qualified for UGC JRF in law from Osmania University in the year 1993. He practiced in the High Court of Andhra Pradesh for about 7 years before joining the Faculty of Law, Osmania University. He authored 20 well-received books on law, including Women and Law, IP, Intellectual Property Rights and Law, Practical Advocacy of Law, Right to Information and Law, and Judicial Activism in India. 2 of his books, namely Women and Law and Judicial Activism in India, have been reviewed favorably in the book review section of The Hindu by Justice V.R. Krishna Iyer. He also published 56 articles on law, published in standard national and international journals. He has been a contributor on environmental law to the annual survey of Indian law published by the Indian Law Institute since the year 2013. He worked as a principal, University College of Law, and head Department of Law, Osmania University, Hyderabad, from April 2005 to May 2008, during which period he contributed to the introduction of the LLB 5-year integrated course at the University College of Law and PG College of Law, Osmania University. He has also introduced LLM in IPR, LLM in ADR, and PG Diploma in Cyber Law. He has been a visiting faculty at several reputed institutions, including the AP Judicial Academy, AP Excise Academy, AP Police Academy, National Police Academy, Nalsa University of Law, and ICADR. And also he has been a visiting faculty at the Acharya Nagarjun University, Bangalore University, VIT University, IIT Kanpur, and University of Hyderabad. At present, he is the chairman of Board of Studies in Law, Osmania University, and the director, University Foreign Relations Office, Osmania University. He is a non-official member to the Cherpalli Central Jail member, member of the Telangana State Legal Service Authority, chairman of the Ethics Committee of CDFD Hyderabad, and member of the Academic Council of Nalsa University. He was also the founder director of the legal cell of the university. He was also appointed as a member of General Council of Nalsa University of Law, Hyderabad, AP State Consumer Protection Council, and the Hyderabad District Legal Service Authority by the government of AP. He has participated in several national and international seminars, workshops, and conferences on law and allied subjects, and has presented papers in Japan, Malaysia, Hong Kong, Singapore, and South Korea. I'm sure that you all will feel enriched with knowledge after completion of this event. I wholeheartedly welcome you, sir. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Respected faculty members, Dr. Gaudi Ramesh, Principal, Dr. Ambedkar Government Law College, and the other learned colleagues and dear participants from different institutions. And at the outset, I thank the college for giving me this opportunity among a galaxy of speakers on various subjects to interact with so many young and dynamic teachers who are in the field of legal pedagogy. And probably we are at a stage when the prospect of teaching law is, in fact, becoming quite attractive and also challenging for various reasons. And this may be because of various institutions occupying the field, like, not only the conventional colleges, including the, government colleges, state universities, then we have corporate law schools, universities, then national law schools, so many. So what keeps a good teacher apart from others is his or her, style of teaching, the academic research, and the contribution. So I strongly feel that the teachers from the, institutions, irrespective of their status, mostly from the, conventional law schools, can certainly make all the difference. Because the greatest teachers, and not, belittling anyone, but most of the greatest teachers of law in India, they hail from our, traditional institutions. But of late, maybe because of use of ICT, then again, the new methodologies of teaching, people feel that, we can't deliver the goods. Certainly we can deliver better goods, and there will be a level playing field for all the teachers. And probably the constitutional law is one such area where a teacher can excel, because there is so much potential in terms of literature, in terms of very frequent developments, either in interpretation or in the form of amendments or in the form of judgments. So certainly the task of teaching constitutional law becomes equally challenging but also interesting. So I will consume the next probably 1.5 hours to discuss a few important aspects of teaching in general. Maybe most of you must have already gone through that. A few, observations. Then I will come to the teaching of constitutional law. As I already mentioned, people always ask us whether there is any hard and fast rule regarding the best method of teaching law and constitutional law. I always say no. Depends on various factors, depending on the background of the teacher, background in the sense, from which academic background the person comes. Then again, the background of the students, the taught, then the level of, teaching. Is it UG, PG, or maybe higher degree or lesser degree? Because I think all the constitutional law teachers must know that teaching of constitution is getting started in the 6th class nowadays. 6th or 5th class in CBSE curriculum. So we must be totally different from those teachers. And they are not anyway inferior to we the law teachers teaching in law colleges and law universities. But we must make a difference. How do we make it is the next question. Well, you know that there are a number of methods which have been employed for the purpose of teaching. But the most common and popular method continues to be the lecture method of teaching even today. Reasons are many, because the lecture method of teaching probably doesn't require much paraphernalia. It must have only two things available. One is in fact an enthusiastic teacher, and second one a willing student, a student who is willing to learn. Place is immaterial, whether it is online, offline, under the tree, above the tree, under the water, doesn't matter. But certainly this method can be deployed. Frequently we also use other methods, not regularly, like the Socratic method, the case method, where some kind of proposition is thrown to the students. For instance, today I was teaching Article 84 of the Constitution regarding the qualifications for becoming members of Parliament. Then I threw open two questions. Okay, you have minimum age for becoming Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha members. Why don't you insist on introduction of maximum age? Should it be 75, 70? Do you still expect people above 90 years to rule us? Can every person be Kenneth Kaunda, Robert Mugabe and Nelson Mandela? Similarly, why the education qualifications are not insisted upon for becoming lawmakers? Make it as controversial as possible. Throw it open. Then invite their opinions, their convictions, and ultimately there will be some kind of consensus. So this is one example of Socratic method. So we have a problem-based method, discussion methods, even clinical education, and I think constitutional law is a very good foil for clinical legal education, because when we have the legal aid, legal literacy, pro bono litigation, public interest lawyering, it is ultimately the constitutional law in motion. Don't think that it's only somebody who is a victim of domestic violence coming to us, or somebody who is not in a position to engage a lawyer coming to us. Certainly, there are other issues, other forms, processes, which we have to keep in mind. That is one important aspect. Well, continuing with this lecture method, I'll make just a few observations, because this method is very relevant, especially when we have to succeed in communicating our theories, our ideas, and even the facts. Very simple. Because, sometimes we may not require any other, PPT presentation or maybe, whatever. Still, we can easily communicate any theory, any idea, or any proposition. Because the purpose of such a method is dissemination of information. One teacher said long time back that the difference between a good student and good teacher is only half an hour, or maybe 1 hour. Within 1 hour, the student will be in a position to get access to all the information which is given by the teacher. I think you have to revise that statement today. It is within few minutes, not few hours, because the students are sitting in our classroom with their laptops fully connected to internet. The moment you mention a case, immediately somebody comes out, yes sir, so and so here, so and so judge, so and so judgment. That is the case. So if we are disseminating information, certainly that information is equally available to the other students, participants also. That must be kept in mind. But lecture method is better suited for dissemination of information, and especially better suited for the high consensus disciplines like law. Ultimately, when there is an agreement, it may be with regard to some of the fundamental concepts, principles, theories, doctrines, or it may be even with regard to, procedures. It is equally relevant to other, subjects, including the subjects like natural sciences, mathematics and all. All of you are aware. I'm just refreshing your memory. Then, anyway, Assume that you are teaching me constitutional law class, I am teaching a constitutional law class. How do you plan a lecture? Normally, in the good old days, even in the B.Ed classes, lesson plans are made. Like, what you propose to do on a particular day, which subject, which topic and all. But if I am supposed to plan a lecture, I normally, my 1 hour lecture, 1.5 hour lecture or 45 minutes lecture, it will consist of 3 components. I conceptualize, at least in my mind. One is about the introduction, second one is the body, the third one is the conclusion. Every lecture must have these 3 necessary components. You simply, it can't be in the air. We must have a plan. That is important. And the introduction, coming to the very first component. We have the introduction. Normally, we shouldn't take more than 5 minutes for introducing what we are going to discuss in the class. 3 to 5 minutes, that's all. Then, within this time, what we can do, very well. You have been doing it. You are not, newcomers. You are seasoned teachers. Don't think that I am teaching anything. I am refreshing your memory. Then, first we'll try to establish some kind of, a cordial relations with the students, a friendly communication. Then some students are very, in fact, serious. So you have to go for some kind of ice-breaking session. Then again, we have to maintain some kind of, appropriate relationship with the students. Like, ultimately reminding them as to what happened yesterday and what is happening today, something like that. Purpose is to gain the attention of the students and to foster motivation. That is important. A student must be, in fact, yearning to join your class. So-and-so person's class, so-and-so teacher's class. We shouldn't miss online, offline, whatever it is. For that, what we need to do, that should be done within the first few minutes. So, for example, you can prompt awareness of relevant pre-existing knowledge. Within 5 minutes, you can mention that. If I am teaching, Parliament of India, then I must draw attention of the students even to American Congress, British Parliament, Australian Parliament, something like that. Similarly, I will also clarify the purpose of the lecture and describe how it is organized. I am saying this by closely observing one of my most respected teacher who passed away, unfortunately, one Professor T.S. Ananthanarayan. Professor Ananthanarayan became a lecturer without being a postgraduate in 1950s in Usman University Law College. And he went on to become one of the most sought after and respected teachers until his death on a dais where he was felicitated on the eve of his retirement. So that was the commitment level. Let me tell you, he was more than 95% blind at the time of his death. So I was in my second year or third year at that time. But he never, because his mobility was limited, he used to sit. But once he started, 5 minutes, after that, it's like, our AP Express or Shatabdi Express. It goes on and medium, Telugu medium student, English medium student, doesn't matter. Everyone is listening with rapt attention. But that kind of interest that was created by the great teachers. So first 5 minutes can be used in any class, not necessarily regular classes. It may be a regular, some frequent interactions like this. One is the introduction part. Then when we...
Sir, sorry to intervene, sir. I guess sir is yet to share the PPT slide. It is not visible for us.
Oh, sorry. I thought that, okay. I'm sharing. I'll share straight away, just now.
Yes, sir.
Yes, now.
Yes, sir. Fine, sir. It is visible, sir.
Okay. I'm talking about body of the lecture. I think body of the lecture is on your screen. Talks about, in fact, it occupies a major component of our lecture. So, how the lecture is organized. For example, out of 50 minutes lecture, almost 40 minutes can be for, in fact, explaining what exactly is the body of the lecture and where we try to include our discussion on the facts, the concepts, the principles, or you can even go for generalizations, comparisons, or give concrete examples also. That's what, I think everybody does. Then another important aspect is, of course, you must have come across a few actors. I'm saying in the lighter way. We the South Indians, we are all cine lovers. We come across certain actors who mouth a dialogue, irrespective of the emotion, in the same manner. Like, the person says somebody is dead, he says in the same tone, and the actor makes or pronounces a dialogue as if he is in love with XYZ, one and say. But that is not the way, we should do something as far as the body of the lecture is concerned. So we may use certain expressions like this. Maybe it's important to remember, note the following, I mentioned that. Probably we have to recollect, memorize, then you have to, in fact, keep in mind, something like that. So these things will certainly, keep them engaged. Then we can use audio visual aids. We are doing this, active learning. Then similarly, we have to be, careful in involving the students, whereby the students will be asking questions, seeking clarifications, giving their own comments, because it's not, one way. I think this is known to all of you, but still. Then continuing with this, for example, maintain attention throughout the lecture. Somebody said that as per scientific studies, beyond 45 minutes, it's difficult to engage the attention of a student. After that, it may go overboard. It's a fact. So how to retain their attention? So for example, you lecture for 15 minutes, that's what I do, right? Then I probably give a kind of learning activity for them. Then I may go for some, from oral to visual kind of thing. If K.M. Nanavati's case has to be explained, I will ask them to watch Rustum movie, not those romantic scenes, but at least the courtroom drama, right? If I'm teaching moot courts, then I'll ask them to watch 12 Angry Men, right? Entire class, go to your audio visual room, watch this. How the, advocate convinces, one juror convinces 11 jurors that their thinking is wrong. Likewise, we may simply use PPT like this. Then concept-related humor. This is very important. Professor Faizan Mustafa, who is the Vice Chancellor of Navsar Law University, once he shared a joke. I think I'm sharing it with you. When he was Vice Chancellor of Cuttack National Law University, there were many complaints against a senior teacher, saying that, sir, his teaching is so serious that nobody really focuses on his lecture. Then he said, better use some sense of humor, some humor concept to generate interest among the students. Then the advice was taken very well by the senior teacher. But again, there was a complaint from the students. Sir, the senior teacher is coming out with a list of jokes. He is reading those jokes in the beginning of the lecture, in the middle of the lecture, toward the end of the lecture. So he means that it is sense of humor. We want to, inculcate concept-related humor. The humor related to the concept, not to anything else. Then similarly, you can ask them to take notes, or you can also in fact give them some kind of incentives. You can always frequently remind that there is a gold medal, or there is an internship, whatever. I think this can be done. Similarly, now we will come to the conclusion part. Last 5 minutes or so. So normally many people neglect this particular area, and this is unfinished agenda for any classroom, because the students must know what they have learnt, what they have shared, what kind of information they have shared. Therefore, students may be laboring under a number of misconceptions. In all such cases, we have to repeat, bullet points may be given. Yes, today in our lecture, in our interaction, we have discussed the following: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is one. Then we always must ask the students to encourage, the questions. Then at the same time, lastly, we can also relate the content of the previous topic and even subsequent topic, what we are going to discuss. Again, I will give you a live example. I think this will be remembered. We have had a High Court judge as the dean of our faculty, because that was the practice in the good old days. Only High Court judges used to be deans. Then one of his teachers, I think some of you must have read a book called Law of Evidence by Professor B. Nageshwar Rao, Butterworth's. I think it's in the second or third edition, recent one. One of the best books on the law of evidence. This judge who became our dean was a student of the great professor who passed away recently, and it seems he specialized in international law in LLM, and there was, in fact, only there were two papers, but one paper was private international law, and there were only two books by Cheshire. It seems one book was with the student, one book was with the teacher, and the student was so, enthusiastic, clever, intelligent, that he used to always, prepare very well before coming to the class, and he used to prepare better as compared to the teacher. So whenever the teacher didn't prepare well, that day he used to take some kind of, make some excuse and leave. That is the kind of thing we have to expect from each student today. Don't underestimate the student. The students are very clever. Therefore, when you give the next topic, there is every possibility of the students coming fully prepared for the next class. Then you also must go to the class fully prepared. Or else again, we have to take some excuses. This is one important point. Lecture delivery also is very important, because normally, our facial expression, our body language, whether we are standing, sitting, or moving from front bench to last bench, doesn't matter, right? Our voice, our modulation, all of them make a lot of difference, let me tell you. Speaker audience distance, I included it from some scientific study. Body movement and stance, facial expressions, gestures, all of them. I think you just remember your own teachers. Some of the teachers come to your mind, the kind of language they employed, the kind of body language they used. And the voice characteristics are equally important. I always keep on warning my colleagues, teacher friends, that please take care of your voice. That is your asset. If we don't have voice, nothing else. Like singers, teachers also. And we have this syndrome. ENT specialists have given a separate name for this. Even evangelists, teachers, lawyers, and also singers. So our strength, the way we enunciate, we pronounce, the rate of speech, you can see on your screen, 120 to 130 words per minute. People, shouldn't, in fact, increase the speed or reduce the speed. Reduction of the speed may be helpful sometimes, but increasing the speed, should there be no time to think? That's what I'm trying to say. When the teacher says something, basic structure theory, is it enough? Simply mentioning Keshavananda Bharati, 1973 Supreme Court, 13 benches, 7 majority, 6 minority. It's not sufficient. We have to, explain, like what exactly are the basic features. Then what happened to Justice Mudolkar in Golaknath's case, what exactly is the basis, what was the argument of Rani Parjwal. These things cannot be mentioned by going at a speed of 150 words per minute. We have to give enough time, and during which the student can assimilate and get back to us. That's another important aspect. Well, there are additional techniques nowadays, as part of the best practices. The colleges, the internal quality assurance cells, they are asking for presentation of an outline of each lecture, keeping it available online. Then repetition of the points in several different ways. People do that, in order to. It's not simply, in fact, remembering those things, but still we can remind them number of times. Use short sentences. You know that writing simple language is very difficult. Writing difficult language is very easy. If everyone uses the language of Justice D.R. Krishna here, probably it's very difficult to understand. The great judge had, a great knack of using different words which were not found in the dictionaries also. So we can use simple languages, simple sentences, stress on important points, we can give sufficient time to the listeners to think and, like synthesize, analyze, like that. Then at the same time, we have to use lectures to complement, not simply to repeat the text. That's what, the incompetent teacher simply reads. You can read one sentence, two sentences, you can quote from the Constitution or any other text, but we can't go on reading. This is one important point. Sometimes, we have to keep personal contact with the students only to the extent of knowing their name and all. Then don't race through the lecture. That's very important, because there is always a next lecture. So we have to give enough time. Then there must be sufficient time kept aside for discussion, if necessary by separate class. But last point is very important: prepare. If you are not going to the class with sufficient preparation, right? For example, I'll give you a live example. Today I asked the students whether there is requirement of nominating 2 Anglo-Indian members to Lok Sabha, whether it is still available, still valid. None of the students answered. Probably, they have not read. Then I had to tell them, sir, please read 104th Amendment 2020. Please see the amendment made to Article 331. Today it is no more requirement for the next 10 years or so. Right? Point is, when we are not up to date, when we are not prepared, certainly, we have many problems to face. Without preparation, by preparation, a mediocre teacher can excel. Without preparation, an excellent teacher will only pretend. Please try to understand. What was good yesterday, day before yesterday, need not be good today. Therefore, we must approach the subject with all those things. The foundations of jurisprudence, like evolution, history, comparative analysis of, the various aspects, then up-to-date knowledge. These are very important point, friends. Now, there are a number of advantages of lecture method. For example, it's economical, it's efficient, then, it gives a lot of opportunity to update ourselves. Then similarly, in fact, it is always facilitating learning, in fact, subsequent learning, flexibility I already mentioned. You can have sufficient time to even, experiment by creating interest. And it will be some kind of teacher-centric. The Week magazine, a few years back, identified a number of professions which will be outdated in the coming years. Do you know that teaching is one of the professions? Now the focus is shifting from teacher-centric to learner-centric. Teacher is only a small instrument today. Whatever he says is not the gospel's truth. Certainly there are other sources which can be cross-checked. But lecture method certainly, makes the things kind of teacher-centric. But there are certain disadvantages as well on your screen, because if you have to lecture for 1 hour, probably you have to prepare for 2 hours. Lot of preparation is required, extensive research is required. Then delivery skills are very important. You must have come across number of excellent researchers, but very poor speakers, and vice versa. This also you may keep in mind. Then again, the individual feedback may not be coming because you are addressing a class of 60 students, 100 students. It may not be possible in most of the cases. Then it is difficult to adapt to individual learning differences because we treat everyone. Because it so happens that when the teacher starts focusing only on those who are responding to the questions, what about others, the backbenchers? Every student must be, in fact, made to feel that they are important. My professor, late Ananthanarayan, used to say, your task as a good teacher is complete only when the weakest student in your class says that, yes, I have learned this very clearly. Not the brightest student will learn any day. Doesn't matter. Our target is the weakest, the mediocre student, feeling that yes, he has learned. There is a clear picture about what he learned. This is another important point. Then another important disadvantage of lecture method is it doesn't promote independent learning, but we can fuse, as I already said. We can fuse, we can combine different methods for the benefit of the students. This is one more important point. So I already mentioned Guru Shishya concept is gone. Mentoring system is still there. In fact, in some of the private universities also there are mentors appointed, one mentor for 5 students and all. And but 21st century is throwing number of challenges. And even today, there is no effective substitution for lecture method. No doubt, the other methods are used only to supplement, but the main thrust is only on the lecture method. This is one important point. Second one is the foundation for learning is mostly in the form of lecture method, through the lecture method, not through self-learning. Everyone is not Dronacharya, Ekalavya, right? Every teacher is not Dronacharya. So this is the age of so many Ekalavyas. They require hand-holding. This is one of the methods. And lecture method can be employed to teach every law subject. There is no other subject, because today you have 50 subjects, 70 subjects, 100 papers, whatever. Every subject can be taught by using this. And equally, we can make use of ICT, information communication technologies for strengthening our lecture. Then we can also make use of the Socratic method, the clinical methods of teaching along with the lecture method. That's the reason why I said there is no hard and fast rule. This method is correct, that method is not correct. Anyway, this is one more important aspect. As I already said, there is no proper method of teaching, there is no hard and fast rule. It may be depending on various factors, as I already said, it may be the subject, it may be the number of students. You can't teach the same way to a class of 20 as compared to a class of 60. UG and PG, that's different, right? Diploma, MPhil, PhD, whatever it is. And other factors are also equally important. Economic factors, social factors, geographical factors, right? But one can overcome. I had an occasion to visit the Chennai University, Madras University number of times for sometimes even for the judging Stetson moot court competition. Philip C. Jessup, Professor David Ambrose used to invite us. And I've seen number of government law college students from Pondicherry, from Madras, in fact coming to the semi-finals, finals also. I found their approach, really fascinating. Maybe thanks to the efforts made by the teachers. So that's where I think lecture method also is quite helpful. Then best method, as I already said, is combination of methods. Now I'm coming to the constitutional law. That is general with some difference to constitutional law. Coming to the constitutional law, how to become a good constitutional law teacher? Point is, one may specialize in constitutional law or public law or comparative law or any other related law at the PG level. But what we need to understand is that Constitution is unique. It is a living document. American researchers always call the US Constitution a living document because 1789 onwards till today, with only 27 amendments, still it's going strong. Same is the case with the Indian Constitution, almost 71 years old, but still going strong in spite of 104 amendments. And Constitution is the supreme lex loci, you know that. Everyone has to look at the Constitution, look to the Constitution, whether it is judges or lawmakers, executive, whatever it is. Then, as somebody rightly said, Constitution is legal heir of the past and the testator of the future. Constitution can never be taught well without having in-depth knowledge of legal and constitutional history of India, which subject unfortunately has been removed from the syllabi of many universities. Without learning, without understanding the LCH, that is Legal and Constitutional History of India, probably we will not be knowing many of the historical aspects or perspectives. That is important. It is a legal heir of the past. Don't think that only 26th November is very important every year. But what happened before 26th November 1949 is important. What happened during those, 166 sessions, days and 11 sessions, everything is important. And we have, a treasure trove of literature on that. I'll come to that a little later. And Constitution also must be understood as the testator of the future of a nation. Future of a nation is written in the form of a will. The will is the Constitution. It determines the future of the nation. Anything is related to constitution, the constitutional governance, constitutional justice, constitutional theory, whatever. Then constitution can never be divulged totally from the politics. It still remains a political document. And constitutions never remain static. All of us are aware. And they are talking about another 4 amendments today. But each amendment has a history. Right? Some amendments probably were not necessary, but still they have been made. So this is also equally important. This is with regard to the fundamentals of the constitutional law. Then I will try to explain what exactly is or has been my experience, because I specialized in constitutional law. Not that I am an expert. If I say that I am an expert, I will be a fool. Nobody can be an expert in constitutional law, including H.M. Sirbhai. Let me tell you, the great authority on Indian constitutional law, still he never claimed that he is an expert. But at least we know the fundamentals better than others who specialize in other fields, right? So my teachers have taught. For example, we used to have number of good teachers, like many of you or all of you. And what I have learned, I'll tell you. My teacher was a product of Stanford University. One Professor Balakrishna Rathe, and he was also a research professor in ILI those days, Indian Law Institute. And he used to explain mostly from the historical aspects. That is one thing. And he always used to say, Constitutional Law 1, yes, it is law. Constitutional Law 2, no, it's mostly political science. Even today there is such belief. Right from Article 52 onwards, we think that it's mostly the political science. So clear distinction between constitution and constitutional law. What the political scientists understand, they call processes, concepts, ideas. And what the lawyers and law teachers understand is slightly different. This is one important point. So historical perspectives are important. No constitution comes into existence overnight, unless it is some kind of despotic constitution. Every constitution, you know very well, must be explained with democratic spirit and historical perspectives. This is the first point. So, what the framers of the constitution felt those days? What was the discussion that took place in the Constituent Assembly, debates? What was the provision under the Government of India Act 1935? You can go back. But those historical aspects must be, kept in mind. When you are talking about the concept of instrument of instructions, today, the moment you mention directive principles of state policy, we say, it is the concept is borrowed from the Irish Constitution. Again, people talk about Sir B.N. Rao going to different countries, then taking the expert opinion from different constitution experts, and ultimately they pointing out that there can't be two kinds of fundamental rights, one justiciable and other non-justiciable. Then he came back, ultimately looked at what Irish Constitution said, then they became directive principles. Truly all right. But in the process, we should not lose sight of the instrument of instructions under the Government of India Act 1935, which also had borrowed the spirit of directive principles of Irish Constitution. Look at the nearby example, then try to integrate it. That is first point. Then at the same time, constitutional law doesn't mean only the, interpretation of articles, but it is also the clauses of the articles, then the various parts and various schedules. What I have seen is that in majority of the cases, the teachers look at only articles. Schedules, only few schedules, not all of them. Anti-defection law, immediately they'll go to 10th schedule. Then 9th schedule, where you can make a law immune from judicial review. Again, there is a lot of misconception there. Today, no law, not that every law which is included in the 9th schedule is immune from judicial review. Situation has changed after IR Coelho. Right? This is one important aspect. Then, interpretation part is very important. Simply by saying that in so-and-so judgment the Supreme Court held that, it is not sufficient. For a law teacher, at least it is not sufficient. You have to go for the proper interpretation of the expression. That's important. So interpretation and analysis of different provisions. So how the different analysis can be made? Go to CAD. Nowadays, probably we can't ignore Dr. Ambedkar whenever we talk about constitution, because he has been the chief architect of our constitution and he has been a great intellectual. There is no area where he hasn't expressed his opinions, ideas and other philosophies, etc. In such case, refer to CAD, refer to what the chairman of the drafting committee insisted, what he mentioned, right? And what the other members observed, right? Similarly, what is the analysis of such discussion in books like Framing of Constitution by B. Shiva Rao? Very unfortunately, we are not touching them. Out of 10 teachers, you may, excuse me if I am sounding harsh, out of 10 teachers, 9 teachers don't touch Shiva Rao or CAD. Simply, we come to either J.N. Pandey, MP Jain, or at least Oxford Handbook on Constitution, which is very popular today. But the historical aspects must be taken into consideration. Then, another important point is, in fact, application of the relevant doctrines. Doctrinal approach also is very important, but evolution of various doctrines, how they have come to be interpreted, right? What is the origin? Where, in what sense they are different from the Indian context and other contexts. I think this also must be clear. For example, if you mention about doctrine of collateral legislation, many of us will be, searching for case laws, right? Kameshwar Prasad Singh versus State of Bihar. Then you mention something else. But I think we need to look into the basics thereof. Then another point is case law developments. Case law is changing. What is good today may not be good tomorrow. Judicial interpretation has been dynamic. That also we must keep in mind. Then compare and contrast. We are not living in an isolated world. There are number of successful working constitutions across the world. There are number of developments taking place. Recently, I read a very interesting article in the Harvard Law Review. It is on an interpretation made by one of the circuit court judges regarding the gun culture in USA. In USA, you have the right to carry arms and weapons, and you don't require licenses like in India, most of the cases. Where the court was saying that in fact without gun there is no American culture. Some kind of interpretation was made just on those lines. We should know what's happening. Of course, not that what is done in USA or UK or Australia is clearly binding on us. That's not the case. That is one issue. Then, so compare and contrast. We have to. Then another important aspect is we have to be up to date with all the amendments. I give you the example. So 103, EWS, 104, again the extension of 10 years period for continuing the reservations and all, including Anglo-Indian reservation, there is no extension. Then again, another point is be up to date with the landmark judgments. Which judgment becomes a landmark judgment? It is $1 million question. Not only those judgments which are liked by us. You may like or may not like, doesn't matter. But which have a long run impact. Any judgment which has a long run impact, which has changed the way the previous judgments were given, the previous behavior of the political armies of the state was observed, that becomes a landmark judgment. But we must be thorough. I will give you an example. Again, today everything is in your cell phone. You can get access to Manupatra, Hain online, SCC online, whatever it is. 20 users can be used with one package, SCC online, by paying around 25,000-30,000 rupees. But in the good old days, how the teachers used to be, in fact, up to date. I mentioned about my constitutional law teacher, Professor Rate. From 1st to 5th, we used to, in fact, subscribe 2 sets of All India Reporter. Those days that was very popular, 1990s. probably today SEC has overtaken it to some extent. Okay, this is one important aspect. So when we talk about the, in fact, the reporters, law reports, the 2 copies subscribed by our library were missing, always were missing from 1st to 5th or 6th. Whenever we asked the concerned librarian, he used to say, sir, one is taken by Professor Rate, the other is taken by Professor Nageshwar Rao. That means what? But they used to promptly return them with, lines underlining, some small comments here and there, and they used to maintain a kind of, the record of every landmark judgment. Today we are able to access the judgment which is delivered few hours back. It is available, bar bench, live law, or Indian Kanun, whatever it is. But in the good old days, it wasn't the case. Why the teachers used to do that? Because they used to be up to date. They wanted to be up to date. You have to be up to date. If somebody says, what is this Anuradha Basin's judgment? Then I think we are lagging behind. Because on one hand, we are using internet. We don't want any interference with our use of internet. But we must know the judgment where the Supreme Court said, right to use internet is a fundamental right. Right to get access to internet is a fundamental right kind of thing. Up-to-date knowledge is required. Then contribution of jurists and others to constitutional jurisprudence is required. This is very, very important. Because the moment somebody says courage, craft and conviction, who should come to your mind? This is the part of the title of a famous article. Courage, craft and conviction. Professor Upendra Bakshi's name should come to your mind. Right? Taking right seriously or taking suffering seriously. Ronald Dworkin should come to your mind. Completing equalities. Mark Gallagher should come to our mind. Right? Working out a democratic constitution. Again, Mark Gallagher should come to our mind. What I am trying to say is that without at least the courts and their judgments by Arun Shourie, that must be read in order to understand the fate of many of the judgments. Because now that it's a constitutional law class, there is a feeling that our judges are very enthusiastic. They try to give in fact liberal judgments. But critics say that yes sir, they will give liberal judgments only. They will be sitting in AC rooms in their happy environs. They may give any kind of judgment. Come and see the implementation of the judgment, you will understand. You can give the example of the rights of the bonded labor as agitated by Bandhuva Mukti Morcha, Swami Agnivesh, who passed away again recently. In 1984 also judgment was given, and even when high courts were made responsible for in fact, implementing the directions of the Supreme Court, nothing could be done. 17 years lapsed. That's what Arun Shourie says in his book, The Courts and Their Judgments. One must know what exactly has been the contribution of various jurists. Michael Gad Boyce Jr., he is also one of the eminent contributors. There are so many others, right? So when you want to make the constitutional law teaching more effective, probably this is one approach. I am not saying that this is the best approach, but that's what I have been following. That's what I do. And I will also give you another example. We had a teacher, a lady teacher, a colleague who worked with us from 1997 to 2005, means almost about 8 years. Very serious teacher. But one thing I liked from her, conduct. Every year during the summer vacations, she used to read 1 or 2 legal classics, whether it is jurisprudence, criminal law, constitutional law, whatever it is, but some classic book. Not that she didn't read before, but she was saying, when I read as a law student in LLB, understanding was different. In LL1, it is totally different. In PhD, different. Now as a teacher, it's different. So that is how I think the teachers also must be up to date, not only with the current developments, but also with the past, what we had read, but from a different perspective. Our understanding will be different. Take for instance, one of my lady PhD scholars was a bitter critic of the judgment in Joseph Shine's case. Joseph Shine versus Union of India, where section 497 Indian Penal Code was decriminalized. I'm talking about adultery. She used to say, no, this is against Indian culture, this and that. Then I asked her to go through the judgment of Justice D.Y. Chandrachud in the same judgment, a separate judgment. Then I said, close your mind. You read it with open mind. You will understand. And she came back and ultimately agreed that she agrees with what the court says, because she could see the reasoning behind decriminalization of section 497. So therefore, that is the, in fact, approach of a law teacher, and that should be the approach of a law teacher. This is one important aspect. Then there is another important aspect. Sometimes, I think we must make use of these, slides. You can see most of the slides, impressive slides could be made. In fact, this I have borrowed from an American site. In order to explain the doctrine of separation of powers, the slide maker, whether teacher, scholar, I don't know who it was, but he tried to explain the doctrine of separation of powers like this. You can see what the legislative branch does, what executive branch does, and what is done by the judicial branch. Then again, the interrelation. You can easily understand the two theories from this. Not only separation of powers, but also theory of checks and balances by James Madison. We can do that today. For example, if you are teaching central-state relations, you can use a Venn diagram in order to explain the distribution of legislative powers between the union legislature and state legislatures. An intersection can be used. There you have central list, state list, in between concurrent list. So this will certainly be remembered by the students for a long time. This is another important aspect. Then a few about the recent constitutional amendment, only recent ones, I'm not referring to many. Because you see, when we were students, the number of clauses in Article 15 were only 4. Today when I read the Article 15, you have clause 5 and clause 6 also. Article 16 had only 4. Now you have 4A and 4B and amendments made to it with consequential seniority. Then you have one more after 1 or 3 amendment. So likewise, about cooperative federalism, you have in fact GST related amendments. Then we have an amendment where right to form cooperative societies also is recognized under the Constitution, 91C. Right to education, 21A. You are familiar with all of them. Many people still don't know that there is 43B about the cooperative democracy. New 45 after 86th Amendment. In the place of old 45. Replaced, no. You are talking about the early childhood education. No more the concept of having free and compulsory education for all the children up to 14 years within 10 years from the commencement of the Constitution. That's an old thing now. After 2002, you have to read this. 51AK, of course, it's a relative responsibility on the guardians and parents. 75(1)A, people are talking about 15% limit. Jumbo cabinets are gone. Jumbo cabinets where, normally there used to be large number of ministers. Every second legislator was a minister. Today it's not the case. You have 75(1)A, then you have Article 164(1)A, time material. Then same is the case with 75(1)B, interrelationship between anti-defection law and membership of the ministry. Then we have the 73rd and 74th related amendments related schedules. Then provisions from 243 ZH to ZT, 335. This is only, in fact, some kind of illustrative list. But if we are still living in the past, our students are living in the future. We can't catch them. Therefore, there must be a proper connection between what we have studied, what we are teaching now, what the students are capable of learning. Like, the NJAC, we talk about that. But what happened to the 99th Amendment and how 124 years validity was struck down in Supreme Court advocates on Record Association. But not simply struck down. Critical issues have to be raised. Right? For example, somebody asked me, you are talking about principles of natural justice. You are talking about nemo juris causa in sua. You are saying that no person can be judged in his own cause. Then how can the Supreme Court be a judge in his own cause, in its own cause? When it's, in fact, supporting the independence of judiciary and saying that that principle, that feature is violated by NJAC, National Judicial Appointments Commission, how can judiciary sit in as a judge? Is it not advancing its own cause? No, there are issues. And we have to read what Matthew Edinburgh, the senior advocate, argued. What has been the response of the Supreme Court? Likewise, this is one important aspect. So GST related amendments under one amendment, then 123rd Amendment Bill. Of course, now this is, it has become 102nd Constitutional Amendment, 102nd Constitutional Amendment 2019, where we come across the constitutional status being given to the National Commission for Backward Classes. That was also challenged. And only this year, 2021, Supreme Court upheld that 102nd Amendment giving constitutional status to Backward Classes Commission. Right? So we have many such amendments. Then we have many cases. Few cases, panoramic view can be taken. Zee Telefilms case, very well. Still, I am critical of it. People ask about the regulation of the cricket associations. Again, I will come back to Madras Societies Registration Act. I will come back to BCCI, which is only a society registered under the Madras Societies Registration Act. How come BCCI has become the largest or maybe the richest sports control body in the world, not in India? So Zee Telefilms looked into all those things. The judgment may be criticized also, doesn't matter. The moment Article 12 comes, you have to discuss this. Then similarly, private universities are coming up. Question is this, whether it deemed to be university is other authority. The court ultimately said it is other authority. Look at that, Dr. Janet Jayapal's case versus SRM University, 2015 judgment. Then we have, because in India there is a knee-jerk reaction for certain things. The moment Nirbhaya episode unfortunate incident took place, there was a demand saying that no, you reduce the age of the juvenile from 18 to 15. Net result, see, Salil Babu versus Union of India, that was one PIL. Another PIL, Subramanian Swamy versus Raju. But ultimately Supreme Court refused. But an amendment was made to the Juvenile Justice Act, saying that between 16 and 18, if any heinous crime is committed, certainly he could be prosecuted in a regular court of law, if Juvenile Justice Board feels so. So, this is one important thing which we keep in mind. And we must always remember and appreciate the efforts of people like Dr. Subramanian Swamy. Personally, I don't know anything about him, but he keeps our candle of learning constitutional law burning always. One case or other, always, I don't know, like MC Mehta, Dr. Subramanian Swamy must have filed a number of cases. This case which is on your screen, it's all about inquiry commission. Whether any inquiry commission appointed under the Commissions of Inquiry Act, and if there is any contempt of that commission's report or status is committed, is it contempt of court? Court says no, commission is different. Even if the Supreme Court appoints a commission, that commission's contempt is not contempt of court, even if it is headed by a sitting judge. So there are, for example, the FACE, free and compulsory education, FACE, right to FACE, that's what we say, which has become a constitutional right, fundamental right in the 86th Amendment, then a statutory right enabling legislation was made in the year 2009 with effect from 2010. The question is very simple. Whether minority schools are covered under this Article 21A, right? Then the Supreme Court went on to say that when it is applied to minority schools, aided or unaided, then Article 30 Clause 1, of the Constitution, I'm talking about the cultural and educational rights, right? So it will be ultra violet the Constitution, therefore, they should not be covered. In a way, some kind of exception is given to the minority institutions. This is another important point. Nagaraju, that is very important. Dr. Nagaraj's case is the one case where the validity of so many provisions were challenged. Article 16 for 4A, reservation promotions for scheduled castes and scheduled tribe employees, government employees. 16 clause 4B, where 50% total reservation limit could be exceeded, right? Then again, addition of proviso to Article 335, that is, maintenance of efficiency in administration while giving effect to the claims of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. All the three of them were challenged, but this is one judgment which has number of dimensions. And I must tell you that in the first reading, it's difficult to understand. If you don't have the assistance of the head notes and long notes, for example, you have the concept of long notes, head notes written by some of the leading law reports like the Supreme Court cases, AIR and all. This is the question. Narco-analysis test. We still keep, recently, the Supreme Court was also lamenting. We declared that narco-analysis tests are unconstitutional. Forced narco-analysis tests are unconstitutional, being violative of Article 20, Clause 3. But still the police are still registering the cases. They are, in fact, they are subjecting people for narco-analysis test without regarding their consent under Section 164 of CRPC. Registration of cases is with regard to Shreya Singha. That is under the IT Act. Even after the IT Act provision was struck down by the Supreme Court, police are still registering. That is also equally important for us. So probably, these are some of the things which we have to keep in our mind. Khushbu versus Kani Amman. Very well. Khushbu made a statement and she was subjected to number of complaints, criminal complaints and others. And ultimately, the Supreme Court had to interfere, saying that what she said is something not different from the legal position, and nonetheless it doesn't amount to an obscene statement. It's not obscenity. Another important point is that with regard to the Center for PIL, who is the person behind it? Prashant Bhushan. This is filed by Prashant Bhushan. This is headed by Prashant Bhushan. I'm talking about 2G spectrum case. Point is very simple. Doctrine of public trust, although constitutional law teachers are aware, under the doctrine of public trust, the natural resources must be managed, preserved and conserved at all cost. Question is whether 2G spectrum is a natural resource. Then whether it can be allotted left, right and center without following any guidelines. So ultimately, in the instant case, the doctrine of public trust was, in fact, extended even to 2G spectrum from the accountability point. It's clear. So maybe, doctrine of public trust is not taught. Many constitutional law teachers feel that it is a subject matter of environmental law. No doubt, it is discussed in environmental law, but our public trust doctrine is equally important, especially in distribution of large SCs, right? The subsidies and anything else. I think in Tamil Nadu, this is a very sensitive issue. I will refrain from saying anything else, but the courts, the people, they are aware that maybe, the public money cannot be swindled away in the form of all these, freebies. That's the point. Recently there was a judgment also. You are aware of it. So there are a number of instances, natural resources allocation. I've already mentioned about public trust doctrine now. I.R. Coelho, what a great judgment it has been. Again, it is from Tamil Nadu by the Supreme Court. And many politicians, many, in fact, even selfish bureaucrats made us believe for a very long time that once the law is included in the 9th schedule, it is immune from judicial review. I.R. Coelho ultimately, filed the case in 1999 or so. Ultimately, the decision was given in 2007. By the time he was dead, but the judgment remains. Any law included in the 9th schedule after 24th April 1973, that is the date of Keshavananda Bharati judgment, which laid down the basic structure theory. If it is included after 24th April 1973, it is not immune from judicial review. It can always be challenged. Point is, whether there is a political will, political opposition, that's altogether different. Legally, this position has been, in fact, clarified by holding that judicial review is a basic feature. It can't be taken away just like that, at least after the evolution of basic structure theory. And there are instances, for example, take the case of Cashworth Ferry. When there is separation of powers, this Raghavan Pal's judgment comes to our rescue. So how, the Somnath Chatterjee, when he was the Lok Sabha speaker, ultimately expelled a large number of MPs in this Cashworth Ferry scam. Because in that case, it was found that there was a sting operation, and it was found that many of these people belonging to different political parties and the MPs, they took money for asking questions. The court ultimately said that the action taken by the speaker was correct. But this is important. Then another one, Rupa Ashok Hurra versus Ashok Kumar Hurra. Remember, curative petition. Curative petition means second review petition, which is not constitutionally maintainable as per the text of the Constitution. But for the first time, the Supreme Court held that under Article 142, this particular provision can be invoked for doing complete justice. When all the doors, judicial avenues are closed, still one more chance can be given by filing curative petition. You can ask your students to make a pilot study of the application of this curative petition. Acceptance, rejection, whatever it is, Afzal Guru, Keshav Mahindra, Rupa Ashok. This was in a divorce matter, but there are other cases. In fact, I am a very strong proponent. One of my young colleagues keeps on saying, sir, let there be a term paper for every student, every semester, not assignments, term paper. So, by the time a student writes term papers for each subject, the student will have nearly 25 to 30, 40, 50 papers, 50 articles in his kitty, and that will give him in-depth knowledge or have in-depth knowledge. Then, burying of the sovereign immunity doctrine. Because the government used to take shelter behind this, saying that no, this is a sovereign act. We are not liable for the torts committed by our servants. It's no more, in fact, a doctrine which can be invoked after N. Nagendra and Company versus State of AP. Supreme Court said, in fact, this is archaic. This is imperialistic doctrine which needs to be buried. So when we teach Article 300, we have to quote this, right? Then applying speed breakers on Article 356, SR Bommai. I think, now you have to look at the application of Article 356 before 1994 and after 1994. Just to see how many times it was misused before 94. And after 1994, in how many cases it was, upheld, right? Rameshwar Prasad's case also, on the same lines. Ram Singh's case. Because, India is a country where majority of the leaders want the country to be backward. There is a backward race. Every caste is forced to be in the backward classes list. Same thing, Jats, they wanted to be included among the backward classes. National Commission for Backward Classes, in fact, opposed this. In spite of that, the central government, maybe for political reasons, included so many, in fact, in so many lists, so many states, jats among the backward classes. It was challenged. Ram Singh's case, I think you have to read the judgment of Justice Nariman, which is a very important judgment, right? For example, I quoted some of them. The perception of a self-proclaimed socially backward class of citizens, or even the perception of the advanced classes as to the social status of the less fortunate, cannot continue to be a constitutionally permissible yardstick for determining so on and so forth. I'm not supporting or criticizing the judgment, but this is a judgment. You can provoke the student, let him come out with either opposition or support, doesn't matter, because we can't take sides as the teachers, but we can put the things in proper perspective. So this is Ram Singh's case. Yaqub Abdul Razak Menon, this is important, who expected that the doors of the Supreme Court will be open at 3:15 a.m. on 30th September 2015. What happened thereafter? What happened to Shatrughan Chauhan's case? Because in our regular teaching of the constitutional law, especially when we teach the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, or maybe the president's pardoning powers, so on and so forth, or legal aid for that matter, right? Then we tend to ignore some of these, because most of our textbook writers, they don't write, they include these. J.N. Pandey may not, though he is up to date. Therefore, it is our duty to include these other important aspects. Likewise, there are so many. I will not go deeper into this. Shreya Singhal, very well, Section 66A of the IT Information Technology Act was struck down. Remember, where, in fact, a software engineer and who made some comment on social, this press, social media post, then it was supported by someone else. Both of them were subjected to criminal case. Next is this. What happened? Point is very simple. Even after the Supreme Court struck down Section 66A as violative of Article 19, Clause 1A, still the police went on booking the cases. You can find out. You can ask your students to conduct some kind of study on this and what the Supreme Court said thereafter. This is another one. This is the age of maybe unmarried mothers also. Point is, why in fact, the father's name should be mentioned in the certificates while identifying the child. Why father's name should be insisted upon if it is a single unmarried mother? Is not the mention of the mother's name sufficient? This is the case. Every mother is the natural and legal guardian of a child. Okay, so father, it's up to the mother and child. That's a different issue. On the paper, it may not be reflected. And then this is what ABC versus State in 2015. This is something else. Vikram Singh, we need not go into this. Sriharan, I will not mention. Sriharan is very close to Tamil Nadu. Rajiv Gandhi assassination case, and how Periyavalan wants the release, the pardon, and how Tamil Nadu Assembly also passed a resolution. How in fact there is a consensus among the political parties, but how the central government puts a spoke, saying that CBI must be heard, central government must be heard. There is not one but many cases involving Sriharan. Latest 2021 also you have another case. So this is a very interesting case. Not because of the assassination of Rajiv Gandhi, but because of the extent of executive power or pardoning power of the president and the governor. So you have to look at Article 73, Article 72, Article 161, 162. Then probably picture will be very clear. Many people think that it's only one case. It's not. There are number of cases, right? Like K.M. Nanavati, 5 cases were discussed. Please try to understand. It's not one case. Rajbala, this is important. Whether you require minimum qualification for contesting election. The matter came up before the Supreme Court. Okay, but Again, the status of right to vote, right to contest are the fundamental rights. Court says no. Okay. Then, in Javed case, you can recollect, way back in 2003, the Supreme Court upheld the requisition of two-child norm. Any person having more than 2 children cannot contest in a Panchayat election, as per Haryana Panchayat Raj Act. That was upheld. Common Cause versus Union of India. No politician photos in government acts. Which politician is getting a single pie from his own pocket, honestly speaking? So why should we stare or glare at them in every government advertisement? Is it not? Let it be a common man. Doesn't matter. So this is the case. But still, some exceptions are made. They are utilized to the maximum extent by the politicians. Devi Das Ramachandra Tunjapurkar's case. Many people must not have read this case. Very interesting case of 2015. So can you imagine? In fact, the people like Mahatma Gandhi or Ambedkar or Patel fighting with each other, using choices, abuses against each other. Suppose it is part of a kind of play written and published by one of the persons associated with the bank. What happens? So this is the case. Gandhi Mala Betala Hota. I met Gandhi. So there was an vulgar and obscene poem. The main result is this. Point is, there are certain standards called contemporary community standards. But the present generation doesn't know what our great persons have done for us. Right? We are incompetent to criticize. Honestly speaking, people like Ambedkar, Gandhi, Nehru, Patel on certain cases. What was going on at that time is something else. But there is a growing tendency among the youth and certain people to criticize, to rewrite the history. This is one, maybe nobody is making use of this precedent. Right? Then we have, some more. Markandeya Kaju. Of course, he is a loudmouth. He says Gandhi is a British agent, Bose is a Japanese agent. Ultimately, we have to apologize. This is one case. Constitutional patriotism. Vijay Emmanuel is gone. Now comes Shyam Narayan Chokshi versus Union of India. Right? I don't know. Just by standing up when national anthem is played, it doesn't mean that there will be, kind of patriotism, but still Justice Deepak Mishra used this word, constitutional patriotism. We can use it because many teachers find it difficult to place leading cases on fundamental duties. This is a fertile, area. When whoever is teaching fundamental duty, especially first fundamental duty under Article 51A, we can quote this, right? This is one. So there are so many. For example, president's rule and political rule played by governor. When you are teaching the rule of governor, question is whether governor is bound by the decision of the Council of Ministers. Some people say no. In fact, under Article 163, governor may have discretion because the term discretion is used under 163, but it's not used under Article 74 as far as the president is concerned. But this is a classic case of Governor Rajkova of Arunachal Pradesh preponing the date of meeting of the assembly session leading to fall of a government. And the government was restored by the Supreme Court in this case. Nabam Rebia versus Deputy Speaker, 2016. Equal pay for equal work. Recently also we must have seen State of Punjab versus Jagjit Singh's case. So most of the, in fact, the contract employees are asking for equal pay for equal work. This judgment is very solace. One must go through it. In what cases it can be, in fact, invoked. Delay in payment, retirement dues. In some cases, in fact, retired persons are not receiving their benefits. The retirement benefits either after 2, 3, 4 years also. Here the Supreme Court says, in fact, every employer must release those without any delay. And if there is a delay, there must be payment of interest on arrears, even on gratuity. Discontinuation of liquor or vending on highways. there is a Supreme Court decision involving State of Tamil Nadu versus K. Balu. So initially there was 500 meters from the highway, but it has been relaxed. In fact, these excise matters, liquor and excise, it is very dear to every government, because without liquor and excise, they think that there is no income. Even during COVID also, the government is very liberal, because probably they consider the drunkards or alcoholics or those who consume for passion as taxpayers. There are cases, Devika Biswas case, right to health and reproductive freedom of persons. So reproductive rights are gaining importance. This is one case. Then blanket ban on Maharashtra dance bars. That was overturned in this case, Indian Hotel and Restaurants Association. Then magistrate has the power to direct the accused to give voice samples, especially in criminal prosecution, criminal trials. That is Ritesh Sinha's case. And this last one, M. Siddiqui versus Man Suresh Das, Ayodhya case. One has to read it, because ultimately the controversial land, disputed land of 2.77 acres was handed over for construction of Ram Mandir. You know what's happening there now, right now. RTI is applicable even to the Chief Justice of India. So when we are talking about transparency and accountability, or CJI and immunities, the Subhash Chandra Agarwal's case is important, right? Then similarly, there are Anuradha Bhasin's case, last one, Anuradha Bhasin versus Union of India, last year. Supreme Court says internet is part of freedom of speech and expression. The present CJI, he quotes among the popular judgments given by him, this particular case also, Anuradha Bhasin's case, right? Then similarly, you have the case of Permanent Commission for Women in Army, because when we teach Article 14 and Article 15 Clause 3 and all, the Permanent Commission for Women in the Army, that has been given in the Babita Punia's case. Please, this is one of the important judgments. It needs to be, in fact, updated in our course curriculum or maybe in teaching. Vinita Sharma's case. Don't think that it is confined only to Section 6 of the Hindu Succession Act. Interpretation of Section 6, father need not be alive and all. But, this gave altogether a liberal interpretation to rights of the daughters as co-partners. This is one important case. And there are many more. Rajneesh versus Neha, very important case with regard to right of residence of married women. Whether, in fact, the residency is purchased from their own funds or others' funds of father-in-law, mother-in-law, etc., still right of residence can be claimed. This is another important case. Then we also have cases like Amit Sahani. This is important case. Right to protest is given, but where to protest? This is all about Delhi, where there was a protest at a central place, causing a lot of inconvenience to the residents and others. Ultimately, the Supreme Court went on to say that right to protest at a particular place is not a fundamental right. It can be at any place, right? Because probably, here the theory of competing rights was given effect to by the Supreme Court. And then maybe I'm coming to the last component. Then Dr. Jayashree Lakshmanrao Patil versus Chief Minister. This is the most important judgment of recent years. Maratha reservation was struck down. The 50% limit on the reservations was upheld. Again, I know that 69% is included in the 9th schedule as far as Tamil Nadu is concerned. That is also under judicial review. I don't know when the judgment will come. It's a different issue. But nonetheless, this is a very important judgment. So there are any number of judgments which have to be relied upon. Contemporary developments in other countries have to be, in fact, referred to. And latest amendments, some of the reports also. National Commission to Review Working of the Constitution. It's a fertile source for a lot of literature on constitutional jurisprudence, right? Some of the Law Commission reports are fantastic. Point is, only when we have sufficient time to look into all these aspects, certainly, I think we can become wonderful teachers. And whoever is teaching the supreme law of the land, that person can teach any law, not necessarily only public law, provided the approach is correct, the proper preparation, proper synthesis is made, proper case laws are applied, discussed, so on and so forth. There are a few resources I think I've given in the small, PPT which I shared with you. These are some of them. There is no hard and fast rule. If you read a book called Sheldon Goldman's Cases on American Constitutional Law, you will come across a beautiful, template kind of thing as to how to analyze a proper case, a case law, pre-facts of the case, arguments advanced, judgment of the court, minority, majority, whatever, short-run impact, long-run impact. A beautiful template. One can make use of all these techniques. I am not somebody who speaks about research metrics and some of the jargon, maybe, more intellectuals, more intelligent people might be using. Our feet are always on the earth and our eyes are always on the resources and the students. And once we follow these, few techniques which I mentioned just now, certainly we can become excellent teachers of constitutional law, and our students will have a very strong foundation in the knowledge of constitutional law. I'll stop here. Now over to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. And indeed, it was a wonderful session. So, sir has highlighted on the technique as to how we can deliver a lecture effectively. And we all thoroughly enjoyed the session, sir. Thank you once again, sir. So, shall we move on to the question and answer session? Yes, sir. So we have many questions in the chat box, but due to time constraint, we will take up 2 questions, sir. So the first question is from Dr. Deebashri Mukherjee. So she has thanked the sir for the session first. And the question is, can you give some tips on how to teach financial relations between center and state in an interesting manner?
So it's in fact, it's one of the most neglected areas of constitutional law. Most of the teachers tend to ignore the center-state financial relations, and most of the students also tend to ignore this because they're thinking it to be a difficult area. Absolutely not. Maybe, I think we must have a clear idea about fiscal federalism, the concept of fiscal federalism. Then, again, certain important doctrines would help us. For example, imposition of the tax. No tax shall be imposed without authority of law. I think it's one of the provisions, maybe Article 264 or so, right? I think 264 up to 5. Point is, right from Magna Carta you can start whether there can be taxation for the purpose of revenue resources. There can be taxation without approval of legislature. Magna Carta said no such taxes can be, in fact, imposed. Right from that side, then we can easily, in fact, bifurcate the powers of the center, powers of the states. Then we can explain about the direct taxes and indirect taxes. Then we can explain about subsuming of nearly 13 or 16 indirect taxes into GST, right? Then we can mention about doctrines like doctrine of immunity of instrumentalities, and that is especially under Article 285 and 289. Then you can refer to American doctrine like McCulloch versus Maryland, right? Then we can discuss about these funds. Funds are also simultaneously discussed. Consolidated fund, contingency fund, public fund of the union and of the states. So which goes into what, right? From which sources? What are the limits of the power of the central government, state government, right? GST Council, finance commissions. These apart, theoretically go for the basis of taxation, difference between the taxes and fees. Then again, the doctrine of the immunity of instrumentalities with regard to, limited exception, right? So we can rely upon a few foreign sources also, like as I mentioned, American and all. And please go through Finance Commission reports. That is important. There's a lot of good literature, easy literature, and we can certainly make it, because nowadays the practice also is blooming, especially on the financial side.
Yes, sir.
This is one.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. And the next to last question, sir. This is from Dr. V. Shamsundar. So what is the effect and validity of dissenting judgments given by judges in cases like NJAC and Sabrimala case, and how to teach those judgments to the students?
Point is, our duty is not to defend, but we have to put the things in proper perspective. As I mentioned just now, for example, if the Supreme Court is battling for the Supreme Court itself, and the primacy of the Supreme Court rather than, in fact, theory of checks and balances or separation of powers, then we can say that probably the Supreme Court, in fact, couldn't have come to this conclusion or could have come to this conclusion. Question is, we need not defend. We are not spokespersons of the Supreme Court. We have to put the things in proper perspective, but the only thing is, we should not take any kind of activist stand. Explain that version and this version, maybe your personal view to some extent, but leave everything to the student. That is the one thing, because impartiality and objectivity, both of them are important. For some of them, the judgments are correct. For others, they may not be. So we should not take sides. We should not defend anyone. So we have to just explain and analyze and leave it to the student themselves.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for patiently answering to the question, sir. And thank you for accepting our invite in your busy schedule, sir. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Sir. Such an in-depth lecture, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, dear participants. So we conclude the session for the day, and we request the participants to fill up the feedback form within the given time, and meet you all tomorrow for the day 7, last day of the FDP, with yet another informative session. Yes, and